All right, welcome to another edition of Culinary Connections Distribution Dialogue, where we dish out uh, the realness of the distribution business from sales and marketing. And today I've got two lovely ladies joining me who've paved their own unique ways in the seafood industry and have seen many things in distribution. Danielle Charette and Alicia Lumea. And Danielle is in Chicago. Alicia is in Boston. Welcome. So happy to have you both. And today we're going to touch on a subject that, for some it may be uncomfortable, but I think it's a reality for not just the seafood or the distribution business. It's a topic that rings true in every industry in America. And there definitely has been changes made in the way that every organization hires and looks to bring people in, but certainly in the seafood industry, women in seafood is a rarity, right? I've been in rooms in distribution companies in quote unquote leadership positions all across the country. And sometimes it's rare to have a woman sit in the room when there's a conversation about, it could be acquisition, it could be, um, you know, anything having to do with making change within a business. And so, this is something where one, it's super meaningful to me because I have a powerful, very vocal wife at home who's now in the business, but has carried her own career. And I've got a daughter in that I'm raising to, hopefully become a powerful woman and whatever it is that she chooses to do. And so certainly want to pave the path forward, and you two ladies are blazing the trail and have gone through a lot of frustrating times I can imagine. But Danielle, we'll start with you. Why don't you give us kind of a little a background on who you are and what you're up to?
So I am sort of in this position where I'm looking for the next opportunity. But how I started in seafood was very out of college, down at the bottom, work your way up, learn the business from, the ground up, which I think is really, particularly in seafood, the best way to learn so that you're understanding sort of everybody's role, right? That the salesperson, the order entry, the drivers, the customers, and I think that they all fit together in such a unique way. So, I mean, it's I don't know where 30 years went, but it poof, it vanished, it's gone. Um, but I think that in the seafood industry, seeing the span of where the industry was, where it is today, where fishing and prices were, the species that were really popular, how they changed, how the offerings shifted. I think it's I think it's really interesting. I'd be interested to see where we are 5 years from now. But I think there's a lot of great things happening. And although I do agree that, you know, I think there's I think there's a lot to have a conversation about, and I think the potential and the future is very bright.
Alicia, what about yourself?
I get into the seafood industry completely by accident, which honestly I think is how you're either, I feel like you're born into it or you get into it by accident. Those are the only two ways in. And for me, it was by accident. I'd already had kind of almost two careers already by the time I made the switch. My first start was in international humanitarian aid. So I started off in the communications department. So really cause driven, a lot of work with the media and learning to talk to people about things they didn't think they wanted to talk about, which actually really holds up in the seafood industry. If you're going to get into the nitty gritty on feed profiles and things that people would be like, that is the most boring, arcane thing I've ever heard. So the ability to like drag somebody into a conversation about something that is important, but doesn't seem like they want to know about it at all, carries through. I studied pastry. So while I was doing refugee assistance, which is, you burn out. And so I did a culinary degree at the same time and then had a chocolate company in New York for 5 years and So I was in the kitchen for 5 years and ready to see daylight again. And I saw an advertisement that I honestly had no idea what it was. And it was for Clean Fish. And I was like, I'm just going to write a letter and see what happens. And I got hired immediately. And so that's how I ended up in the seafood business. And that was really, yeah. And I think it was very much from a sustainability standpoint and talking to people about the issues. So it perfectly fit with the background that I had built. And I've never, I worked for Clean Fish. I had my own consultancy for about 6.5 years with a business partner, and we worked with projects in seafood and in, a few other things in hospitality, food oriented, and then ended up coming back kind of through Clean Fish / Wolves, since it's one company again. But yeah, it was completely something I had no knowledge about the industry when I got into it. And so it was very much figure it out as you go. And, Clean Fish was kind of an interesting ragtag group of people to fall in with in the beginning anyway, because it was kind of some people from the seafood industry and some people with just a hope and a dream and, like the ethics. And so it was a real mashup, and then kind of learned everything practical since then and just on my own, because it's now been 15 years, I think, since I since I got in and didn't make it out again.
You're never get out.
You never get out. You never get out. It's a lifer kind of thing.
And then it's over.
Yeah, it sucked you in, that's for sure. One of the interesting things about being a part of an independent distribution company is, typically, and Danielle, you've seen it, Alicia, the same thing. Like you start as a small unit, and you just continue to grow and to grow and to grow. And I've lived it myself, and that comes with its own frustration because, you are the problem, you are the solution, right? There's not this robust team. There's so many firsts that you encounter. It's like, well, hell, I don't know what to do in this situation. We've never encountered this. And you don't have this robust HR and policy. And, I would joke with people, in independent distribution, there is no red tape, just duct tape. And, you're just literally figuring it out on the fly and like, hope this works enough for right now. And you move on to the next set of problems. And, that can, in family owned businesses, that can provide challenges too. You've got nepotism that's, that does, run true. And as an independent owner, you have choices in whatever you want to do because it's your company, right? And, then you couple that specifically in food distribution, where, the hospitality industry has been known as one of the leading industries for substance abuse. English as a second language. It's typically one of the least educated when you look at like secondary, higher level education. So when you're in that environment, it's less professional. And I think each of us have friends that have worked as an accountant or an attorney. And when you ask for a meeting at 2:00, that means 2:00 you have a meeting. In hospitality, that doesn't mean anything, right? You may have a scheduled 2 p.m., but you may end up meeting with, the third in command that, could be a 25-year-old that, really has had no professional experience, and you're left trying to really move the needle forward with that individual. So I think you throw all those things into it, it creates even more of a storm for, you could say equality or equal opportunity in further enhancing your career as a woman. In my house right now, there's we watch Barbie quite a bit because my wife is into it, and so is my little one. And I've got the monologue here. I'm not going to read it all, but if you've not seen it, it's a pretty powerful movie. It's literally impossible to be a woman. You're so beautiful, so smart, and it kills me that you don't think you're good enough. Like, we have to always be extraordinary, but somehow we're always doing it wrong. You have to be thin, but not too thin, and you can never say what you want. You have to be healthy. You also have to be thin. You want to have money, but you can't ask for more money because that's crass. You have to be a boss, but you can't be mean. You have to lead, but you can't squash other people's ideas. You're supposed to love being a mother, but you don't talk about your kids all the time. You have to be a career woman, but you also need to be looking out for other people. And there is I've seen it with women I've been around where, you can feel the frustrations that are real because of maybe being roadblock. Are those valid things that you've encountered and seen in the industry?
I mean, in a word, yes. I think, I think I think the expectation is always unrealistic. That's it's a, and I think really maybe it comes down to an unrealistic expectation, but also then a what happens when someone makes a mistake, right? Because everybody makes a mistake. That's how you learn. Do you have a mentor? Do you have someone who is advocating for you who can say, okay, all right, here's where maybe you stepped too far right when you should have stepped straight or left? Or can you think about this situation like this? Um, or have you considered this? Instead of somebody looking at you saying, well, you made a mistake, you're done. And I think eh, I don't understand why, but it seems to me that we are more forgiving when it comes to men, right? They're allowed to be, they're allowed to make mistakes. They're allowed to be too aggressive. They're allowed to come off maybe a little bit louder, a little bit more obnoxious, and they get a pass, right? I mean, as a woman, you can be branded as too outgoing, too loud, too direct, too transparent. Um, you know, I don't I don't know why that is, and it seems to be from everyone though, right? So I don't understand that. I don't understand why we don't have a more forgiving and human aspect to all of these things. I mean, I am super multifaceted, right? I can talk to a customer, I can, sell a product, I can manage a team, I can design my house, I can make my dinner, I can raise my kids, I can clothe everybody, I can worry about the landscaping, I can do all of these things, and I have to do them. Like, there's really no room for me not to have something in there. But, like, have you ever really looked at a man and said, well, can he do yard work? Can he raise his family? Can he does he have the patience to read a bedtime story? Can he figure out what rash is on this kid's arm? Can he take a day off of work and rip his kids out of school because there's like an emergency? Like, we don't even ask those questions. So for me, it's very confusing to try to navigate what is and isn't okay, because once you've made if that's not okay, do you get, now you're kind of branded, right? So I guess that's for me the larger piece of this. And I don't think it's just the seafood industry. I think it's every industry. And so, yeah, I don't know. Alicia, how do you feel?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I encounter is just the assumption of ignorance. I think there is true that men get a pass that you meet it, especially in a senior role already. There's an assumption they know what they're talking about. And then
Yeah.
somehow there's a counter assumption for women that you don't. And so it's like every time you have to prove
Every
your
time.
competency
Mm-hmm.
every time, because it's like a surprising thing. Like sometimes you feel like if you were, the talking dog or something, you're like, oh, she knows something. Whoa, even about the topic. And it's like a surprise every time. And that I think is difficult to have to like prove your way into the conversation every single time, even after, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, of doing, sometimes the same issues. And I think that is a real fundamental way. And again, I think that's beyond seafood of why we assume,
Yeah.
I would get frustrated early in my career because I think there's this concept of like the brilliant young man. And I feel like society wants a brilliant young man so much, they'll promote somebody who's not terribly brilliant just to fill the role. But there's no spot for the brilliant young woman. They're like, we weren't looking for one of those. We wanted a brilliant young man to like kind of head up this new thing, whatever it is. And I would see, even in other industries, just, guys who are fine. Like the amount of times you've seen guys who are fine get promoted up when there were, even in a different sector, women who were truly excellent getting passed over because they couldn't be cast in the role. And so I think that's a lot about, it's a much larger societal issue of like, do we feel that that brilliant young woman can be cast in the role? Is it gendered to have the new person who heads up the exciting initiative? It shouldn't be, but that requires everyone involved to really look at themselves and look at how they've cast that role in their head. It's, to the Barbie thing, it's the beautiful woman and the brilliant young man. And you get, which one's it going to be? And when you're looking for promotions, they tend to cast, they want to cast the brilliant young man. And I think that's a really fundamental shift of like, why is that? Certainly, in a male-dominated industry, it's going to happen more and more just because there are fewer women to promote. But I think it is part of the essential assumption. Sorry.
But when they promote that man, right, what are they asking? Yeah, they want it. They think, okay, well, he can do A, B, and C, and we can teach him D, E, and F, right? And when they promote a woman, well, what does she know? Can she do all of these things? Are we going to help her grow? Are we going to support her and give her the time and the tools to actually gain that knowledge? Or are we expecting her to already have that knowledge? And then who likes her? Do you have to be liked? Have you ever heard anyone ask a man, oh, I'm sorry, there's too many people that don't like him? Really? Is that a factor? Maybe it is a factor, but then why aren't we asking that about the man if they're asking that about the woman? Oh, no, too many people don't like her. Oh, well, why don't they like her? Is it because she actually holds them accountable to their job and then they don't like women who do that? Or what really is it, right? So I feel that this bar and the standard is just different. And we have to be perfect. So it's so funny. I feel like society talks about how you don't need to be perfect. No body is perfect. Nothing is perfect. Don't worry about being perfect. There's no need for perfection. That's an unrealistic goal. But then when you get into the career, they do expect the perfection because you can't have the mistake. It's almost like a mixed message. I feel it's very confusing. And at the end of the day, all you can do is come back to being who you are and being your authentic self and learning to accept that, you know what? Your authentic self isn't going to be liked by everybody. But I guess I don't want to be in an organization that's worried about like that instead of the capabilities, right? Like you're capable of probably designing like the most sustainable, feed program, like with all of the bioengineering and like all these things that you could probably do. And I just think that those are the questions. We're talking about the work. What about the work? Just don't think we ask that enough. We talk about the work with the man, but not with the woman. That's weird.
Well, and I definitely think that we're coming to a crossroads of generational change in every industry, where you've got younger people, both men and women, that are taking new leadership roles. And for me, I went to public school in, inner city Houston. Both my parents worked. Sometimes my wife went to school in small town Mississippi, so she has completely different perspective on life, where I was exposed to every different race and kind, and just like, you know, most of my friends' parents, both of them worked, and that was just a normal thing, right? And sometimes I can be more oblivious just because I have expectations of like kind of looking at things completely different, yet the vast majority of the world doesn't see things that way. Um, and now we live in a society that attention lives at the palm of your hands, right? Where you're creating attention, um, independently. And it's also been with two kids. I've got 5 and 7-year-old, right? I see people are like, why do you do so much as a dad? And it's like, wait, what do you mean? Why do I do so much as a dad? It's like equal stuff, right? Like there are kids and we have to parent them the same way. And I would definitely say, it's from, my wife's family that, grew up in Mississippi, where they're not used to maybe a husband contributing to the raising of kids, but it's just like all my friends equally raise the kids. Like it's just, that's the way it is. Um, as a young professional that's maybe in the industry right now, you both have lived paving a path. You talked about mentorship, Danielle, and having someone that can advocate for you. If you have someone that's, in their mid 20s right now that's just starting out, like what can they do, if they're a woman in any industry, right, to really kind of make sure that they're being heard and that they're in the meeting and that they have attention in the right way. I hate to say the right way, but
So, so
I mean, I think it's very difficult to ask what can they do, because if you're 25 years old, you know, there's not as much that you can do. I mean, sometimes you can persevere, you can put up with a lot, but I think the question for a larger audience is what can you do to make the room and the meetings that you're convening more diverse? It's really the executives who get to pull in those younger people. Sometimes, and I think a lot of young people are very good at advocating for themselves, but it doesn't mean that they're going to get taken seriously if someone older doesn't want to. I mean, thinking through these questions of like, well, what can you do to be taken seriously? I'm not sure I can ever do anything to change anybody's mind. If they've decided that they don't take women seriously, then I don't know that I've ever changed anyone's opinion on that. I mean, fortunately, there's an awful lot of people who don't have that problem. And I've, been able to work with them. But I feel like for someone very young and wants to be in this industry or other industries, unfortunately, you have to toughen up a little bit and get used to getting blown off and just try to not let it bother you. But otherwise, really, the rest of the industry, it's for everyone else, everyone who's not the 25-year-old, to think about how to make those meetings more diverse and go out of their way to make them inclusive. If you look around and you're like, why are there just a bunch of old guys in this meeting? Like, first of all, you're probably going to get a lot of agreement, and consensus is not necessarily the way forward. Like, no one's putting a new idea out there, so it's not great for business to have the same kind of person who tends to agree with the one right next to them. It'll make a fast meeting, but you might not come up with anything useful. And so it's the person who's convening that meeting's real responsibility, if we want a better industry and if we want, a better society, to look around and be like, okay, we need to invite some more people to give their opinion here. We're going to have to make this more diverse. We're going to have to, bring in, and I think that can come from even just different kinds of work experience and different kinds of life experience, even beyond gender diversity, to help us get to the new idea. But I feel like it's the 25-year-old's not going to be able to change the world on their own unless we make a better setup for them.
I agree. I think it comes back to, I think you have to pay attention, to the people, right? So an organization is just an organization. The people make up the culture, and the people make up what happens, right? So if you look at this organization and you see that it's a bunch of guys and they all like to do the same stuff and they're not particularly diverse, and everything they're talking about doing doesn't really interest you and doesn't speak to you in a passionate way, and you don't feel like you have anyone mentoring that you really respect or admire, I think you have to start asking yourself, do you want to be part of that organization? Right? Do they incorporate? I mean, yes, having a job is important, but having a job you're really happy at is so much more important, and it's so much more fulfilling. And I think it's up to me and you and every woman who has already been this, is that you need to champion and you need to help that young generation. And it does come back to women standing up for women, because there's so many. I almost think it's like a divide and conquer, right? So if this one person is the person who's making all the decisions, and that's the person and it's a man, like, now you've got 47 women fighting to, like, I have to please this person to get to where I want to be, because it's really not about the work. Well, that's a whole other level, right? Like, I don't know, I think we need to, hate to say it, but like, take care of our own in a way, right? And help and be available.
Yeah, a lot of senior leaders always talk about culture. Like, it's like going to Kirkland's and buying a culture sign that you just go hang, like, live, laugh, love, that you just put those around the office and that's going to be sufficient. And the reality is it's not. And regardless, male, female, you have a choice in where you work. Like, you got to be willing to walk away from an environment that is not going to be healthy for you as an individual. And
Yeah.
that in itself is like, everyone talks about voting with your dollar, right? Vote
Yeah.
with your job, right? You have it. Yeah, it could suck for a period of time, but ultimately it's going to end up being a better situation for you by choosing to leave. And now there's organizations, Inc. does, like, top 1,000 places to work. In the distribution side of it, Chef's Warehouse is a part of that, and they take DEI very seriously into the way that they really evaluate everything that they do, at least as an outsider looking in. And you actually have to go through, and jump through hoops to achieve these different things. But I think as a senior leader, you have to create an environment that fosters growth for all people. And just because it was done one way back in the day doesn't mean that's the way it should be done today. And, you know, my wife often tells me, look, change is going to happen when men help change happen, right? And I think uh,
That is true.
people have to, the husbands and leaders that are men have to take it seriously that, like, I probably am very oblivious to things that I've never encountered that both of you have encountered that have been very real and may have been preventative in getting another job or in, getting a pay raise. And I think everyone advocates for, we want the best person to have the job that can have the job and help us thrive, but we should all have an equal shot in getting that opportunity, right? And creating an environment, one, that you feel safe, like being able to go to work and speak your mind. I always tell people the worst thing you can do is if you go into a meeting and there's silence and agreement, like, that's probably not a great organization, right? Because they've created a culture where all they're going to do is suffocate the the thought of the supposed leaders in the business, right? I would tell people, look, we need to have conversation and not confrontation, right? Like, everyone should be able to come to the table and say, I think we should change, or this is, my reasoning. If you're not creating that environment, you should definitely take a hard look in the mirror of kind of recalibrating your thought to provide opportunity for everybody. But realistically, it is in your hands as a senior level owner. Like, you have full control of creating a new culture and starting anew if you choose to do that.
And I think that it's really, it goes back to the disconnect of, you know having I don't know whether it's the disconnect of talking about I mean, it's really what it's a human condition, talking about what's important to you and your goals and your values, but then your actions aren't matching, right? So it's really about living what you believe, and being straightforward. And I guess part of that is just the human piece, right? If it's important to you, do you feel comfortable in any environment having the confidence to say this is important to me, and then following through, right? And it's a fear, or some of it's reality based. When you need to have a paycheck and you need to put food on the table, like at the end of the day, maybe you're sacrificing some things to make that all happen. I mean, it's all connected. But I think knowing who you are and what matters to you and what's going to make you happy, that's the most important thing. Because then if you have, and I don't want to stereotype, but if you have 40, I'll just say 40-year-old men who all like to play golf, who all watch football, who all want to do X, Y, and Z, who all dress like this, who all agree, who are all saying the same stuff, and you come in as somebody who has an entirely different set of values, going in, that is an uphill battle, right? That is a mountain now that you have to see, hey, wow, I'm looking at this table, and all these guys are very similar. How do I fit in that? And I would also say, like, when you got a bunch of people around the table and you are the different one, no matter what happens, you are the problem, right? Because you don't fit. So I would just, any person who's sitting in an environment and considering being an employer, like, wow, like, it's this way or the highway. I don't know. It's like the thought.
Well, that's become another side of people say they hire, like, do you work with our culture? And sometimes do you work with our culture means do you also have khakis and golf and like football? Like,
I like
is that, like, is
I have
that what does meshing with our culture mean, or does it
right.
mean something else? And so that's definitely a problem in hiring. For I mean, that's across every industry too. I think it's been written about for tech, particularly, like, well, what it comes down to is we hired this guy
Right.
and no one else really.
Actually, we look for this person, right? We look for this person. And, for them, maybe that works, but they're also missing this whole other set. And, in this country, if it's about making the customers happy, you have to start asking yourself, who are the customers and what is important to them? It comes from the bottom up. It does not come from the top down. You have to listen to what is happening in the ground level of what does the customer need from us? What value are we offering? What need are we fulfilling? And when it doesn't start there, in my opinion, it's not going to work. It's a different, well, we're going to do this and this is what they're going to buy. Really? Like, I don't know. Have you spoke to them about that? Because I'm not sure they're going to be on board. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've come across that kind of, it's that whole, you have a group of people who all think the same and they might not actually understand the target customer at all. I mean, it's certainly come up on the marketing and design side. We see that, it's how you go to the seafood show and everything starts to look just like Deadliest Catch, even though they're trying to sell to, like,
Yeah.
young women in their 20s. You're like, really? did you really think this through? Like,
Oh
I know
man,
that's
some of
what
the
you
seafood
like.
packaging on like the new innovative. If you walk
Yeah.
the Cena aisle of like new and innovative, I'm like, what in the world? This is atrocious.
I
No,
got
and sometimes you hear these guys, you're like, oh, I really like that. And you're like, you haven't been in a grocery store in 30 years. Get out. You don't even know like what
you're,
anything looks like.
somebody needs to call Sephora, okay? Because they know what they're doing, right? Like, what is going on? Yeah.
Hmm.
But
There's
I
a
mean,
lot of refreshing that needs to happen. When you look at the landscape, Alicia, I know that you recently hosted a event uh, around Cena for, was it?
It was with an organization called Seafood and Gender Equality, or
Okay.
SAGE. So we co hosted with them. And so it was a women in seafood networking event, which was really a long held dream for me from coming, like, to go to that show the first time and be like, wait a second, there's really no women here. Like, this is, this is bizarre. So now I think it was my 15th show this
Oh
last
wow.
year to be like, there are more of us than it seems, when you're walking around, you're like, you literally don't see any other women for 2 minutes at a time to be able to fill a room, and like how diverse the professional experience was of everybody who was there. I mean, I've heard from so many people who were so excited about having somewhere to come and meet. I think just by the volume, Danielle was there, the volume in the room showed how much everyone wanted to talk to each other. It was, it was so loud and so energetic.
it was so energetic, and I connected with like four different women who I knew like peripherally, but had never had like a real intense conversation. And I'm realizing that my feelings and your feelings are their feelings. And this goes from like the West Coast to the East Coast, all across the country, in every section of every geographical region that I was so pleasantly surprised to feel that we all looked at each other. Well, there was drinks and food involved, but we all looked at each other and said, "Yeah, wow, I agree with that. Like, I'm I'm sick of that. Aren't you sick of that? Yeah, I'm totally sick of that." Like, we were all like so excited to like bond over this thought that like, and we weren't all together and have never worked together. So it was really, it was a fantastic event. Kudos to you and your team.
Thanks. I hope we'll do it every year. I don't know how we can make it bigger, though. We'll have to move. I don't think we could have gotten one more person in the room, which was so exciting for a first time. And I think it's these kind of interactions. One of the things that is really an issue in seafood, I feel like, is it is just slow to move with the times in
Yeah.
general. And part of that is that lack of diversity. And it's gender diversity, it's racial diversity, is even taking the opinions of people with other specialties. It's like the science people hang out with the science people, and the distributors hang out with the distributors, and the chefs are like, and you're not getting that cross pollination where the scientist and the oyster farmer and the distributor are all in the same conversation together.
Do
And
you think that's based on like that it's such a small industry over such a large geographic area that it's hard for us to get together? Why do you think
I
that?
think that's I think that's part of it. I think there's also just a real
I think
digging
there's been a
in.
competitive nature too, where it's like, I don't want you to know my secrets, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things that I
Yeah, which
wanted to
is
create
kind of silly.
this podcast was it's geared towards food service distribution professionals that, like, number one, I've had a chance to talk to distributors of all shapes and sizes from across the country, and we're more similar than we are different. And to your point, like, your feelings are the same feelings as someone in, Charleston, West Virginia, that is a distributor salesperson and, just doesn't know how to connect and find Danielle. Like, how can I have a pen pal, that
Yeah.
I can relate to and I can vent to and that we can come together. And so having Sage as an organization that's going to continue to, cultivate and build up steam. And I bet there's going to be an event that happens in Dallas and one that can happen in Portland and another one that can happen in a different part of the country to foster this relationship of like, you do have a voice, and our voices collectively have a louder voice as a unit. There's another organization called Women's in Food Service that I don't really know a whole lot about, but I know that there is an organization out there if you've not looked into it. And if there is another organization, I know Danielle, myself, and Alicia would love to find out,
Yeah.
because I think it is important to create your network of people, because your career, you don't know where you're going to go, right? Like, we all have life curveballs that happen, and that you're going to move to a different part of the country.
Yeah.
4 years ago, I had no idea I would live in Denver, Colorado, right? And I've uprooted my family, and I live here now, and I've been able over time to build a network here. But it is really helpful to just pick up the phone and have a conversation, and get a I understand what you're going through moment, right? That can be a sense of relief that someone maybe in your home circle doesn't necessarily relate to. You can lend an ear. I can lend an ear to my wife, but it's different than her talking to you because you've had that direct experience that she's shared.
And I think it's complicated a little bit by the fact that even and there are some general larger organizations nationally that are trying to connect women, but I also think that there is a locally, like within the community I live in. I'm really fortunate as that my husband is a stay-at-home dad, and I'm the person who really is working outside the home. There's not that many women that have my setup. So it's kind of odd, right? I don't have anyone that I can go, like, we're not talking about the same topics. There isn't a community of professional women whose dads stay at home. Like, there's nobody who really gets it for me. So it has to do with other women in that situation. Maybe as we all age, 50 years from now, we're all dead. Like, hopefully there'll be some woman somewhere that, feels valued and isn't constantly trying to like prove themselves, because that's just the nature of how we feel.
What
It's not
about,
yeah.
diving in real quick as we kind of approach time, is sales and marketing in seafood has evolved in 15 years, right? The way that we used to go to market 15 years ago, regardless of male or female. But how have you seen, both of you have been a part of, uh, you know, very prolific seafood organizations that impact the way restaurants and chefs access food. How have things changed?
I mean, I think some of the conversations I have changed. I mean, for the marketing side, it's different. What we talk about, I mean, from sustainability, obviously, is a much different conversation than it was 15 years ago. I mean, definitely, there were early meetings where you just got laughed at. Literally, like whether that was gendered or not, too, of like, you don't know how it is. Nobody, like, no one will ever brand a fish. Go to the seafood show now. How many fish brands are there? Like, I had that conversation 100 times 15 years ago. Like, that's ridiculous. It's not how it's done. No one will brand a fish. Like, because we were talking about, Lockdeer, it was new on the market. And they're like, no. So we don't have that conversation anymore. I mean, there's also, for marketing, there's just so many channels. I mean, you didn't deal with Instagram because it didn't exist. There was you had a website, but you didn't have to talk to people in social. You didn't have to talk to people just across so many different channels and try to communicate with them. But I think it also offers different opportunities and different ways to connect with people that have been good. It becomes a burden, and just, this is one more thing we have to do. I don't know that marketing departments have grown, even though the number of platforms have grown. I think it's still, at Wolf's, it's basically me. I mean, I have like one person who helps me a little bit. I've had up to one staff person before, but that's it. Otherwise, I'm a one woman show doing all of this. So I think that what the conversation can be has definitely evolved. I mean, at the same time, we're still selling fish. It's still a minute to minute kind of high volume, high stress business
How
is like
important
things coming in
is
and going out.
how important is social to you guys?
For Wolves, it's a really big deal, actually. I mean, we had already cultivated a good presence on Instagram before I started, and we've grown that and we've grown that engagement, and I find that the chefs are on it all the time. So for that piece of our relationship, but we also get approached by producers that way. I found producers on Instagram, like just seeing someone's feed and like gone actually to another country to meet them because I saw them on Instagram and we brought in their products. So it has become a really big tool, and for us, we really embrace it. It's sometimes I don't want to be embracing it when I'm retweeting, or not retweeting, like reposting dishes that chefs have tagged us in, and it's Sunday morning, and I'm doing this right now, so they don't feel that they got missed, and they feel acknowledged, and it's like, Sunday morning, so I'm like, that's not my first choice of what I would be doing, and the phone is, perpetual then, but it also is a really great point of connection, and that it lets us offer, now that we have a good audience, it offers extra value to our customers. Like, I think it's another way to make that relationship a little less transactional, which is something that I'm always trying to do, because if it's just a transaction, the relationship's not very sticky. It always just becomes about price. This gives us another platform where I can offer them something. I can do a reel with the chef, and so I'm actually offering them publicity. And so that makes it another offer. I don't think very many companies in our industry use it like it could be used. Partly because it's a lot of work. You can't just get like your niece to come do it, which I think is that old, like, I got a girl and she'll do some post for us. Like, okay, but she might not really know how to do that. Just because she can do her own Instagram doesn't mean she knows how to like build a business identity online.
And I think that, well, first of all, I think that your Instagram, I feel like the marketing that Wolf is doing is fantastic. I think I've noticed it in the last 3 months, by the way. I think you upped your game. As far as like from the other side, I would say there's not a lot of margin in this business. And doing the posting and creating all that content costs money. And it takes a lot of time. And talk about the cycle of 24/7 and never being disconnected. Like, you can't disconnect. It starts to beg the question, what do you want to be doing day in and day out? And I had a different opportunity, but was like, I would literally have to sit at the computer all day. I would take pictures all day. I would post and respond all day. And this is what I would be doing. I don't think I can do that. Like, physically, I was used to being a lot more in a customer's presence, right? Like, in a different way physically, right? Or out, seeing what's going on. I think that we're going to all have to make room for somebody that can sit and do that day in and day out and be on the computer and have an eye. And it's an art, right? So now you're talking about advertising, marketing, customer service, PR, kind of wrapped in a little bow, right?
Yeah, each distribution company should start thinking like an agency, right?
Yeah.
Having a video production team, looking at the analytics. Like, you can't just do one post a day and check the box, right? Like, and you have to, the way you communicate on Facebook versus Instagram versus TikTok versus LinkedIn versus YouTube versus what's your landing page like? What's your email look like, right? What's your tangible marketing material? What's your invoice? What do your truck wraps look like? Like, Oh, by the way, if you have a food show or you have any type of engagement, right? Wolf's does a great job doing like the oyster and caviar classes, but those take time and effort and, hounding people to like come to the damn class, right? And making sure they're fun and successful so that you can do another one and the vendors feel valued. And, I, you mentioned you're a 1.5 man woman show, right? That's like juggling the things. The reality is, over the next several years, I mean, how does VR play a role in the way that we tell our story? How does it, imagine putting your goggles on and having Wolf's warehouse tour and a caviar class and like digging your hands in an oyster bed and like, having that's a really real thing that, in just a few years, people are going to have that type of experience. I think Open Blue Cobia, they
Open
do
Blue
that kind of,
does.
they
Yeah.
do that cool experience.
Right, but
It's very good. It's
I would say, do your kids have this VR stuff, or do you know? Do you have relative? I can put on my son's VR and click on Netflix and watch a show on this headset. It's like if I want to binge something, I could literally not need a TV and just sit with the thing on. I mean, that's wild. That's wild.
Yeah, I mean, there was a picture that was on Instagram this week, and it was like of a '90s kid, and that kid had a Walkman and like a little, the big box TV and a newspaper, and it's like all that now is this, right? Like this is now your bank. Literally this is what you. I mean, if your phone dies, you get a panic attack. If you can't get Wi-Fi on an airplane, Lord have mercy, people, freak out over
I
not being connected.
Wi-Fi and it's acting. Yeah.
Well, we could talk for days, Danielle and Alicia. Thank you so much for this short conversation that needs much longer thought by so many people. If people do want to find Sage, where can they go find Sage to get connected and plugged in?
there is a website, and so if you go look up seafood and gender equality, just Google it, you'll find their website. They have an Instagram for women in the industry. They have a networking. It's mostly in a group chat. Even it's called the Bloom, and you can apply and be part of that. And they do events. I just recently joined the Bloom. I think like so many people in the industry, where I was doing 100 things. So I literally had the tab open on my home computer for 6 months before I actually just filled out the form and did it, because that's just the way it is. I'm like, that's optional, and moved on. They also have a speakers bureau, which I still need to sign up to, because we go to too many events where you have, the panel that is all men. We can at least do better on that level. We can, invite different opportunities. So it's putting in one place for anyone booking a panel. Here's 100 very talented, experienced women to choose from. Don't say you can't find them. We have them on one page. You can look them up. So I still need to put myself on that speakers bureau. But it's an easy Google, and they can get plugged in that way.
Awesome. Well, we can't move the world forward if we don't have these conversations and thought, to make change and realize that we should do better for ourselves and the people around us. And sometimes we have to look ourselves in the mirror and realize that, we can be a part of the problem, be a part of the solution, and making that choice and having a voice and vocalizing and helping to advocate for our sisters, wives, friends, right? To have a voice and a chance to further themselves is super important to me and hopefully others. So thanks for being a part of the conversation. Hope to have you guys on again soon.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. All right. Take care.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.